Hello and welcome to this broadcast by Brexit Watch. I'm your host, Jonathan Saxty. Today we are delighted to welcome back to Brexit Watch the chairman of the Brexit Party, Richard Tice. Richard, welcome back to Brexit Watch. Real pleasure to have you with us.
It's great to be back. Thanks for re-inviting me. I obviously didn't misbehave the first time.
Certainly not. Now, Richard, obviously last week we have heard new restrictions come in terms of the coronavirus. I know you have strong opinions about this. We've also had new proposals come in from the Chancellor, from the Treasury, presumably to avoid this cliff edge which would have come with the end of the furlough scheme in October. So what do you think about the way the government is now handling the crisis based on the last time we spoke, or compared to the last time we spoke? And will the Chancellor's policies really just kick the can down the road?
Do you know, Jonathan, I never thought I would say this, but unbelievably, I think this government is actually handling this crisis worse and worse. Because the truth is, there is a cautiously positive picture to tell. And what the Prime Minister last Tuesday should have said is he should have said to his fellow citizens, we are making progress. Cautious but positive, relentless progress. Why? Because, yes, as expected, in the autumn, when people get a few sniffles, the number of cases is going up. The good news, it's going up amongst young people, who are the best people to get this disease because they'll build up some herd immunity. The other good news is that whilst the number of cases is going up a bit, surprise, surprise, because they're testing a lot more people, you would expect more positive cases. The other good news is that hospitalisation rates are barely moving upwards, the incredibly low numbers. And the even better news is, blessedly, mercifully, the death rates is again incredibly low. You are something like 5 times more likely to sadly die of flu or pneumonia than you are of COVID. So for those reasons, and that's thanks to improved treatment techniques, using drugs like remdesivir, dexamethasone, using techniques like proning. So our excellent surgeons, doctors and nurses, have learned how to get on top of the treatment of this. So actually, as I say, they are making real progress. And that should be, we should draw comfort from that. And likewise, until last Tuesday, the economy was starting to move in the right direction. Everybody was starting to build up a little bit of confidence. And what he could have said and should have said is that we mustn't be complacent. Let's keep staying alert. Let's keep social distancing, washing our hands, wearing our masks. We're making a difference, but we can actually start to recover the economy. And he should have reminded everybody that a healthy economy means a healthier nation. And he should have reminded people that, of course, it's sad that 30, 35 people are dying with COVID, not necessarily of COVID every day, but that is about 2% of the 1,600 people who die every day of every year for over the long term. You have to put it in context. He should have reminded people that whilst it's sad people die with COVID, the average age of death is 82, which is the same as the average life expectancy. Okay? These are important statistics that the Prime Minister and this government utterly fail to get over. They're actually all positive news. Instead, we have a cabinet of cowards led by a cowardly Prime Minister, and that all of them, they are whimpering and cowering behind the sofa, right? Rather than actually leading a nation of lions. We are a nation of lions. And historically, we have proven that time and time again. Never before have we been led by such a cowardly leadership. And unbelievably, this is a Conservative leadership. And they are a bunch of cowards who are frightening and terrifying this nation with the wrong data, with incorrect data. In some of the cases, it's just untrue data, as exposed by the ridiculous presentation by Whitty and Vallance the day before the Prime Minister's speech, when Whitty put up this chart that bore no relation to reality whatsoever. He tried to terrify people, and then he tried to say it wasn't a prediction, even though the whole point of it was that he would predict these are the terrifying things that could happen. Quite extraordinary. And it's had the effect of terrifying the nation. Totally unnecessary. And therefore, what's happening in the business community is lots of businesses who are clinging on by their fingertips. They're now basically saying, we're going back into some form of lockdown, and ever since then it's been drip, drip. The news today is there could be some form of what they call a 2-week circuit breaker. We all know that basically means it's a different name for the same thing, which is a lockdown. Remember the first time it was supposed to be 3 weeks, it turned out to be about 14 weeks. So forget the 2 weeks. So businesses are saying, I'm done, we're giving up, I'm done, I'm laying everybody off. And I'm hearing that more and more. You walk around the centre of London, where I am as we speak, and the picture is getting worse, not better. Why would anybody, any sensible business person, want to invest money in a new business, or clinging on to their hospitality, their bar, their restaurant, whatever, providing a service on the high street when you know there is so much weak, feeble leadership from this government? So, I think the government's handling it incredibly badly, worse than ever, and I can't believe that that's the case. The impact on the business community is devastating, and to be honest, all of that actually is making the Chancellor's statements last week, truthfully, completely irrelevant. Because in reality, those measures require a business to pay more money than the hours worked they're going to get from someone. If they know that we're going into a variant of lockdown, they're just going to say, do you know what, I'm not going to bother, I'll wait and see, but here's your redundancy notice, I'm very sorry, it's very sad, but we're being led by fools. I want to be a lion as an entrepreneur, but I can't be if we've got these cowards at the top, running the country.
Richard, you may be aware, I wrote an article in the Telegraph at the end of last week where I essentially said that my fear was that in the spring we will be exactly where we thought we would be in October. Well, all the Treasury has managed to do is kick the can down the road, and really, because of the reasons you've just said, we're not going to be particularly any better off in the spring. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right, and I've got a really, really bad feeling about, why did the Prime Minister talk about 6 months? He could have said, we'll review this after 1 month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, at least give them some hope. The whole point of leaders is to give hope, to give optimism. The glass must always be half full, never half empty. And my goodness me, the old Boris, who's disappeared, always used to be the most ebullient, the most optimistic, the most ambitious of almost any leader that we could recall in recent times. And that's great. That's why people loved him, for all his characteristics and flaws. And that's gone. People want some optimistic leadership. I worry that when he talks about 6 months, it is about kicking the can down the road. And I think there's something much more sinister going on. I think the government has made some huge, huge mistakes. They are petrified. They are absolutely petrified, like the cowards that they are, of the public inquiry that people were starting to talk about. Have you noticed all of talk of public inquiry has recently vanished, gone away? The mainstream media are not talking about it. What they're doing, they're kicking it down the road so that they can say we're still in the pandemic, so it's too early to have an inquiry. And then what will happen, as night follows day, eventually, hopefully, there'll be a vaccine. And they'll say, we're so focused on getting everybody vaccinated and recovering the economy, there's no need for an inquiry. We've learned the lessons, we're through the worst. Yes, mistakes were made, but don't worry, and we've learned from it, it's fine. This is all about covering up their huge mistakes. And there's another major, major question mark that potentially is the biggest scandal of all, in that this government doesn't seem to understand the issue of false positive results on these cases. And Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk Radio recently completely exposed the lack of understanding by none other than the Health Secretary. He seems to think that a 1% false positive rate is 1% of all positive test results. It's not. A false positive rate of 1% is of 1% of all tests conducted. Okay? Now, if you've got a very low prevalence of this disease in the community, and the prevalence may be, coincidentally, around 1–1.5%. If you have a low prevalence, and if you test in the community, let's say 100 people, then you will get a false positive rate of about 1%. But if the prevalence is only about 1%, then essentially, potentially, almost a huge percentage, potentially 80–90% of the cases actually are false, which explains why. You might expect that, because the people who get these positive results don't know they've got the disease. They feel fine. They're asymptomatic. It might be a historic, small trace of something they picked up. It might be a tiny viral load. It's not really a positive at all. So they are potentially making the wrong decisions based on the wrong data at the wrong time. And this is really important. And I think that this hypothesis is being, that is the view of the experts at Oxford University, the likes of Carl Hennigan, Sunetra Gupta, who is promoting herd immunity, but they are being ignored by this government, who are enthralled to the scientists and the academics and around Imperial College, despite their completely discredited modelling at the beginning of this crisis. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to be really careful of, and I'm becoming less and less confident in the spin and the data that we're being fed by the government.
Richard, leaving the current COVID situation for a moment, let's turn to all matters Brexit. Obviously, we've had this internal market bill proposed over the last couple of weeks, ostensibly to correct the problems with the withdrawal agreement. Ben Habib and I have written extensively about this, problems with the withdrawal agreement, the Northern Irish Protocol. We know that this coming week, Michael Gove will be, I believe he's heading to Brussels, but certainly I know that the EU-UK negotiations are ongoing. My first question is, what are your thoughts on the internal market bill? Do you think it's necessary? If so, why is it necessary?
I think it is necessary, and because fundamentally, and I think most countries around the world, in particular, sort of, the many friends we have around the world, they completely understand the fact that we need to make sure that the internal trading arrangements, the technical trading arrangements between the four nations that make up the United Kingdom, that is a matter for the United Kingdom. We're a sovereign nation, and bluntly, I don't think anybody else cares about the internal arrangements between our four internal nations. And they completely understand that that's got to be logical and seamless. And if there's a technical gremlin in the withdrawal agreement, then it's completely reasonable, using clause, I think it was clause 38, which confirms that the sovereignty of the United Kingdom is paramount and overrides anything in the withdrawal agreement, that we're perfectly entitled to make an adjustment to our internal trading arrangements. And given that the European Union clearly acted in utter bad faith in seemingly suggesting they could somehow try and treat Northern Ireland as a third country to the rest of the United Kingdom and almost create some form of food blockade, was the inference. What I think that the government should have done is they should have been on the front foot and explained that the European Union were not operating in bad faith, and because of that, we had to make an adjustment through the Internal Markets Bill. Of course, no one expected them to operate and negotiate with such bad faith. But in so doing, they themselves have broken the International Treaty of the Withdrawal Agreement, which was predicated on good faith negotiations of the political declaration. So in so doing, they forced us to make this change. If they had talked about it in those terms on the front foot, the whole nation would have roared behind them in support. But instead, they had a Secretary of State, it turns out deliberately, in a sort of set-piece question from Bob Neal, deliberately think that it was clever to suggest that we were, on a specific time-limited way, we were quite happy to break international law. It's just a ludicrous way. And then it turns out they were surprised by how bad the reaction was. Utterly, totally self-inflicted communications disaster, totally unnecessary. The changes to the Internal Market Bill, I believe, were completely instigated through the bad faith of the European Union, and that's what the government should have said. Look, ultimately, they've worked out a way where it probably won't even be necessary, but in communications terms, it's further evidence of a government that simply cannot proactively get its act together and make basic common sense, positive leadership that we expect.
Richard, my next question is really split in two. Part one, why did the government leave it to the 11th hour to do anything about this withdrawal agreement? Part two, are you concerned by a perceived backtracking by the government, considering some of the opposition from Tory rebels?
I don't know the answer to that, save that, in truth, I don't know when it was that the European Union acted with such bad faith and suggested just how they might treat Northern Ireland. That could have been quite recently. I just don't know. In a sense, it's sort of, I don't think it really matters that much. And I mean, in respect of, am I concerned about where we're going with this? Well, so far so good, in fairness. This is the foundation stone of this government, and they've done everything that they said they would, to the letter. Everybody's got huge confidence in now Lord Frost, and my goodness, if anybody deserves a peerage, it's him, not the Prime Minister's brother. And Lord Frost is doing a good job so far. I know, of course, we've all got to be alert to the risk that the Tories do what they've done before, which is talk a good game and then sell us out at the end. And I know, people are on the watch, on the lookout, and I don't think that will happen. But of course, I could be wrong. I'd be very cross if I'm wrong. All of us will be very cross if they sell us out, and we will make a big song and dance about it. And the government should not be surprised, as and when, if we come after them, if they sell us out on things such as fishing, on crucial things such as state aid, and see. We'll just have to wait and see over the next couple of weeks. It's always the last minute that these deals are done. I've always said I think there'll be some form of partial deal done. I still think that's 75% the most likely route, where both sides can say that they've maintained some red lines. So you could, for example, see a sort of deal on fishing where we don't quite get as good as the Norway deal, where they negotiate annual quotas. It may be that there's a 2 or 3 year deal initially, and then it reverts to annual or every 2 years. It might be some sort of compromise like that. But state aid is really important. We mustn't concede there, because in this huge economic downturn that we're going through, which is going to get worse and worse, this government is going to need to move at incredible speed to basically to protect and prop up some strategically important businesses, the likes of Rolls-Royce, British Aerospace, British Airways, and a number of, many others that are facing a complete collapse in demand, in cash, and they need to move very fast without having to, go on bended knee to Brussels and ask for forgiveness, penitence, and their consent to do whatever. This is really, really important, because state aid, most people sort of say, well, what is that? Why do we care about it? It's very simple why we care about it, because there are hundreds of thousands of jobs potentially at stake if we concede on state aid. We've got to have maximum flexibility. It's more important than ever. These are working class jobs up and down the country, in communities, local towns that are reliant on particular industries, and it's very, very important.
Richard, my final question. We've spoken about the coronavirus and Brexit. You've been very passionate about the incompetence of this government. Recent poll has actually shown Labour has overtaken the government, certainly in one poll at least. You may have seen over the weekend the actor Lawrence Fox is establishing a new party, Reclaim, to challenge the what is called the woke culture. Do you think, given all of this, the Brexit Party or some kind of new reform party, especially if there is a betrayal on Brexit, is there going to be a role there?
But the thing about politics is it's all about timing. You have to have a target and things have to be sufficiently grave and serious. It's incredibly difficult for small parties. But we succeeded last year with the Brexit Party because we got the timing right. The target was crystal clear. The anger amongst voters was intense. And, you know, in a sense, I think up until now, there hasn't been a target. But there was incredible concern, as Lawrence Fox has rightly identified, on the issue of the culture wars. He's very focused, rightly so, on that. You know, we are very focused and very concerned about these new lockdown measures. You know, a month ago, it looked as though actually everybody was making progress, but things change. So, you know, we keep a very close eye on that. And likewise, we don't think the government's going to sell out on Brexit, but if they did, we've always said we are there as an insurance policy. So it's about timing. Let's watch and wait and see what happens. But it is one of those things where literally anything could happen. But we are, you know, to coin an expression, we are very much staying alert. We are safe. Our eyesight is good, and we're watching this government very, very carefully.
Seems a good point on which to end. So, Richard Tice, thank you for coming back to Brexit Watch.
Great pleasure.